Welcome to the Bald Brad Show. In this episode, we have Fox News reporter Jacqui Heinrich going up against White House admin regarding the student loan debt forgiveness plan that's been initiated by the Biden administration. As always, if you want to support us here at the Bald Brad Show, hit that like and subscribe button. With that being said, let's go ahead and roll into the clip.
I wanted to just go back to your comparison between this and the PPP loans,
Sure.
because what Republicans and critics are saying is that there's a difference between those decisions being voted on by Congress and those loans that turned into grants being by and large for to cover businesses that were shut down by the government involuntarily because of a natural disaster versus students who willfully took out their loans and are now unable for whatever reason to repay them. There is a difference there.
Well, I would say both actions are based on laws that Congress passed. We are implementing a law that Congress passed, actually a Republican Congress and Republican president in 2003, the HEROES Act. And again, that's the exact same legal authority that the previous administration used to put a pause on student loan payments. That's the authority that we're using in this instance. So, we are acting consistent with the law. And look, to go back to my earlier point, we're not against PPP. We're supportive of the idea that small businesses should get relief. The point is that over the past year, we have been forgiving hundreds of billions of dollars worth of loans to business owners. And remember, that program was stood up very quickly. Money went out the door quickly, and Congress could have come back at any time and said, we should look a little bit more carefully at these loans. Maybe we shouldn't be providing forgiveness to people if they clearly did extraordinarily well during the pandemic. Remember, these are really low interest loans. Maybe we should just make them pay back their loan at a low interest rate rather than forgiving it. None of that happened. We didn't hear from a single Republican pushing for any of that. Everyone was on board with forgiving up to $10 million in loans. And so all we're saying is that it's hard to credit those same people who are highly supportive of that program and that amount of debt forgiveness, turning around and saying that forgiving a fraction of that amount for working people, not business owners, but working people, somehow that crosses the line over into socialism. That's not how we view it.
Of course, that's not how they view it, because they're pushing a socialist agenda. And if they say that they're pushing a socialist agenda, then obviously everybody's going to get pissed off about it. And the main question, again, I don't know what it is with this administration on just being able to answer questions. For some reason, they just can't do it. The question was, on one end, you shut businesses down with force, and on the other end, people went out willfully taking out loans themselves, knowing that's going to drive them into debt. So one was force, the other one wasn't. Doesn't cover that whatsoever. And I think he is right in terms of talking about the PPP loans, that maybe it could have been handled better and differently. I do agree with that. But I love how he's going to pinpoint of, oh, well, not everybody might have needed the loans. Not everybody needed a $10 million, handout for the loans, whatever it may be. But then on the other end of the spectrum with the student loan debt forgiveness, not everybody needs a loan. Some people are able to pay off their loans themselves. Some people are working very hard to do so. They don't need that handout. Some of them could be offered a lower interest rate, of which he utilized again with the business loans as an example. He's not implementing that. Some of these lesbian dance theory majors are getting their loan forgiveness, and that's not really going back and helping America when you could be going out, again, helping like they are doing the teachers, the first responders. If we were to talk about the positives of if we wanted to implement this thing, again, I'm not for the student loan debt forgiveness. I'm just calling out the fact that he's using ideas for the PPP of what should have been implemented, but is not using those very same ideas of what should be implemented in the student loan debt forgiveness if they were to implement it smartly, of which they're trying to say they are doing. So it's just so crazy to me that in a single paragraph, he's not able to see the mirror and the connection of one to the other or the differences between force and non-force. It just doesn't seem hard to me, folks. By the way, this is the executive director of like the National Economic Council or something like that. It's another guy getting paid a lot of money to not answer your questions.
What's the difference, though, between, I guess, how are you justifying using a 2003 law that was designed to help military families for this purpose, where you're now helping bail out people who took out loans and cannot pay them? Do you view people who can't pay their debt as heroes, like those who are in our armed services and were fighting after 9/11?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think, as the president has said, there is a real problem here with the burden that student loan debt places on people from low-income and middle-income families. We used to have a system where a Pell Grant, which is federal support to low-income families, used to cover 80% of the cost of going to a four-year public college. And as of today, it covers 33% of the cost. So what are people supposed to do? They want to get a degree. They're being told that's the right thing to do. They think it's going to help them.
Universities. Why not build in something to make sure that borrowing moving forward is limited, or that universities don't just ratchet up the cost?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because I want to address it. Remember, the president put out a three-part plan on this, and the third part of it was accountability for colleges. And it detailed a few things. Number one, unlike the previous administration, which loosened the reins on colleges and universities, rolled back rules that were intended to hold them accountable for raising costs, this president and this administration reinstituted an enforcement office at the Department of Education that goes after these types of colleges. It kicked out an accreditor, which is a private company that basically says that this institution, this college is good enough, so they should get federal loans. This accreditor allowed colleges like ITT and Corinthian to get access to federal loans, and then those colleges defrauded people, defrauded students.
You notice he's saying a creditor, but he's treating it, and this administration's treating it as if it's like a massive issue. They do the same thing from the progressive left with institutional racism. Like, I'm sure there are some institutions, or there's some example you could pull from the history of the United States, guaranteed that there was some sort of institutional racism in the past, and somehow they correlate that today. There's a single creditor that they're spotting here of like, oh, we're calling this one out, but they're making it seem like it's a major problem. Furthermore, he just got done dictating and telling us of how there was such a burden between middle-class families and lower-class families on being able to pay back their loans for a reason as to why we should forgive their loans, because it's a burden on them. Why is rent not a burden on them? You're willing to put in a moratorium, specifically in Los Angeles, to basically have the tenants not pay rent, and now we're going on almost 3 years of them not paying rent and putting that liability on the landlords. You're also not willing to forgive mortgages, which puts a big burden on middle class and low income families as well. You're not willing to get rid of those. You're not willing to figure out the financing and paying off for that for people's vehicles. That's a big burden on them. You're not willing to pay off their credit cards that they're using willy-nilly left and right. So it's just so odd to me that they're so hyper-focused on this specific section. And I'd also like to point out, they're not even going after those that have private loans. This is purely for the feds. So this whole thing of like, oh, it's a burden now. What about those before COVID that it was a burden to pay off their loans and they still did it? What about those that paid off right before or during COVID? You're not helping them out. It's only those that left COVID that still have debt. As if, they're the only ones that are having burdens. They're the only ones that are having issues. This is such a cluster F, folks. It is so baffling to me. And there's people going on TikTok, Instagram, these news outlets that are all supportive of this. But then, they say, oh, well, it's a burden. They're going through this. There's no difference between the PPP. There's no difference between the government forcing you. You can't even have a conversation with some of these people with logic because they lack that very thing.
Students. So this administration responded by kicking that accreditor out of the program. They're not going to be able to accredit colleges anymore. And I would note that a central element of the president's community college plan was accountability, so that neither colleges or states that took that money could raise prices on students unfairly. So all of that said, I think that we believe that the department should have even more authority to go after bad actors and to hold colleges accountable. And we're eager to work with Congress to advance any proposals along those lines.
What a phenomenal job. Just another admin of the Biden administration sitting there dodging questions and making it seem like there's no difference with the HEROES Act. That was implementation for those that were actual heroes compared to those of treating people that can't pay off their loan as heroes. So what are we going to do? We're going to forgive their debt as if they went to war or as if they made the ultimate sacrifice. Now, there are some people in there, right, that made the ultimate sacrifice, that are heroes, that have student loan debt. But furthermore, they're also given incentive through the GI Bill and other mechanisms of military recruitment to get that refund or to get their college paid for in the first place as well. So this whole thing of him dodging the question is getting old here, and it has the possibility of costing us upwards of $1 trillion now. There's this new survey that came out, this new study that talks about that this could possibly hit $1 trillion or more by the time it's finished. But they're not going to talk about this. Remember, according to them, this is all paid for. But at the same time, they don't even know how much it's going to cost. What a statement, right? That they're going to say that this is all paid for because they have $1.7 trillion in deficit, according to them, and that it's just going to be paid for through that. But yet, if you look at the money that's coming in, because they're going to implement the people having to pay back their loans soon, about the pause, is that they're only getting $4 billion in. But in just 2022 alone, it's going to cost $300 billion. Well, where's the makeup of the $296 billion that you're going to have? Because you can't just say, well, because there's a deficit. If that's the case, then you pretty much wiped out your deficit on this one thing, and we know that's not the only thing that they're implementing here. They just got done paying like $3.9 billion for ITT tech students, and that's not the only thing. So they're just throwing out stuff left and right, and it is socialism, folks. I mean, it literally is a redistribution of wealth in a nutshell. So this is going to keep going, and I can't believe that they actually think this is going to benefit them in the polls, because a lot of people are pissed. A lot of Democrats are pissed as well, and independents. So I don't see this helping them in the midterms. Let me know what you think about all this, and let me know what you think about this knucklehead up here, acting like it's not a big deal, acting like force and non-force are equivalent with one another. I'm really interested in hearing your opinions. As always, hit that like and subscribe button, folks, and I will see you tomorrow for an episode of The Bald Brad Show here on The Bald Brad Show.